The Republic was dying, and everyone in Rome could smell it. Corruption rotted the Senate, mobs ruled the streets, and generals turned their legions into private armies. At the centre stood Julius Caesar, brilliant, dangerous, and hungry for more. He crossed the Rubicon, he crowned himself in glory, and in the end, he was stabbed beneath a statue of his rival by men who once called him friend. This isn't just Caesar's story, it's how a republic became an empire, one betrayal at a time. Step back into the churning tides of a world long vanished, where ambition and survival wove their relentless dance. We find ourselves in the dying embers of the Roman Republic, a grand colossus with feet firmly planted on the precipice of ruin. Here emerges young Julius Caesar, whose destiny flickers amidst the shadows of tradition's ruins and the ascent of unyielding power. Born in July 100 BCE, beneath the relentless march of Roman legions, Caesar's beginnings are unassuming yet profound. His family, the Julii, noble yet not among the wealthiest, form the nurturing ground from which his insatiable hunger for power springs. The stories of his ancestors, echoed in hushed tones by family firesides, plant seeds of ambition deep within him, inspiring a quest to restore his family's honour. The stroke of his early life is shadowed by Rome itself, a landscape turbulent with political strife and populist uprisings, as elite factions cloaked in splendour battle for survival. The masses, burdened by deprivation, rage beneath oppression's weight. In this era of paradox, Caesar's formative years become a tapestry of insights into the fragile constitution of Roman society. Among his mentors is Gaius Marius, his uncle by marriage, a figure both revered and reviled. Marius's daring military reforms and the inclusive enlistment of Rome's poor glimpsed opportunity. Yet they also laid foundations for future upheaval, a legacy of ambition mingled with peril. The era is painted red with the conflict between Marius and a rival, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, a struggle that shook Rome's core and redefined its politics. As their battles unfold against the backdrop of his youth, Caesar learns hard lessons in the fragility of power and trust's fleeting nature. These seismic struggles demonstrate the impermanence of authority, weaving tales of purges, betrayals, and exiles, unforgettable imprints on Caesar's mind. Knowing well the dangers of alliances and misunderstandings, he learns to tread carefully, cultivating a keen awareness of power as a game to be both navigated and mastered. Against such volatile backdrops, Caesar's education becomes more than academia. He immerses himself in Greek and Latin, rhetoric and law, building a foundation not merely of knowledge, but of the art of persuasion and strategy. Beyond books, he absorbs the raw lessons of realpolitik, surrounded by the stormy dynamics of alliances and enmities swirling around him. His family ties soon intertwine with the political realm through strategic marriages. Shunning a betrothal to Cassutia, he weds Cornelia, Marius's daughter, a bold, calculated step that speaks volumes of his allegiance, despite Sulla's iron grip on Rome. These marital alliances prove to be as instrumental as they are precarious, teaching him the potent value of personal and political connections in a landscape fraught with change. The shifting tides take a more dangerous turn when Sulla dispatches proscriptions targeting adversaries, forcing Caesar into exile in Asia. This reluctant retreat grants him reprieve, a chance to sharpen his craft and military mettle. Upon his return, Rome presents a tumultuous stage, a chessboard half played, with pieces scattered and allegiances capricious. Caesar deftly manoeuvres through this maze of treachery, readying his foray into political life with cautious yet unwavering resolve. As quaestor in Hispania, he steps further into the labyrinth of Roman governance, witnessing the convoluted intricacies of power. He begins to weave his web of influence, building a presence that will later reverberate through the Roman Forum, a place where his name becomes a testament to both ambition and acumen. Yet, Caesar's growing influence is not confined to halls of governance or battlefields alone. It permeates the social fabric of Roman life, steeped in superstition, spectacle, and ceremony. Rome pulses with customs and contradictions, the pungent sense of bustling markets and famed bards blending with the rhythm of rituals binding city and soul. In this vivid tableau, Caesar discerns how power extends beyond policies, permeating daily lives. A vision of Rome not simply silenced by Senate decisions, but echoing with the voices of its streets. He grasps the importance of culture and legacy as tools in his arsenal, understanding that power, like art, narrates stories that outlive empires. In grand orations and public revelries, he sees the means to fuse his military ambitions with the patina of time-honoured tradition, each spectacle and echo reverberating through generations. Caesar's early life, shadowed by Rome's declining republic, becomes a crucible, shaping not just a leader, but a visionary, whose sights extend beyond the horizon. His childhood insights build the architecture upon which his strategies will stand, redefining Rome not as a monument to past order, but as a canvas of opportunity. In the world he inherits, where the Republic totters on the brink, Caesar sees the potential for transformation. Ambition, a torchlight guiding his path, paves his way. The young Caesar, moulded by chaos, forged by family legacy, and guided by Rome's ever-swirling contradictions, prepares for a destiny that would leave an indelible mark on history. As his journey unfolds, the Republic stands not at an end, but at the dawn of Caesar's vision. A Rome reborn through reform writ large, and power seized from the hands of those who dared underestimate ambition's reach. The Mediterranean Sea, once a bustling artery of trade and communication for the Roman Republic, had become increasingly fraught with danger. Pirates prowled the waters, capturing ships and demanding ransoms, showcasing the fragility of Roman dominance even at its peak. Into this treacherous world stepped a young Julius Caesar, ensnared in an adventure destined to shape his burgeoning legacy. Not unlike a hero from an ancient epic, Caesar found himself held hostage by seafaring marauders who demanded a ransom for his release. Yet these men soon discovered that their captive was no ordinary noble. Caesar was both audacious and cunning, and he intended to turn this misfortune into his narrative's first chapter of greatness. While in captivity, Caesar exhibited an uncanny composure, treating his plight with an unexpected air of confidence. Rather than adopt the demeanour of a defeated aristocrat, he mingled with his captors, even ridiculing their ransom demands as insultingly low and suggesting they raise the amount, a move both brash and strategic. He entertained them with poetry and witty banter, all the while promising retribution once he was free. These were not mere idle threats. Caesar infused his words with such gravity that they implanted a sense of fearful respect in his captors. This episode laid bare Caesar's understanding of power dynamics and the construction of public personas, a skill he keenly honed for later political gains. Upon his release, backed by a hastily assembled fleet, Caesar transformed from a captive into a commander on a mission of reprisal. The pursuit of his former captors was swift and relentless, showcasing his capacity to transmute personal slights into displays of calculated vengeance. His very public act of crucifying the pirates, a punishment reserved for the gravest offences, did more than assert his dominance. It projected an indelible image of a young leader in control of his own destiny. Yet, intriguingly, he ordered the executions to be merciful, revealing a complexity of character that left many contemplating his blend of ruthlessness and unexpected clemency. This confrontation, far from a simple act of revenge, embedded Caesar in the consciousness of Roman society as someone singularly unyielding in conviction. It elevated his stature within the labyrinthine networks of Roman nobility, suggesting a leader capable of bold action in defence of personal and collective honour. Returning to Rome, tales of his ordeal reverberated throughout the city, capturing the imaginations of friends and future allies who saw in him a potential to restore and preserve Rome's grandeur, or at least their own interests. The episode also served as a crucible for leadership, honing skills that would later define Caesar's political and military manoeuvres. From engaging in high-stakes negotiations to executing decisive military strategies, the affair with the pirates enabled him to test and refine his leadership tactics in a condensed environment of duress and expectation. Each decision was a layer of personal ambition, entwined with a public demonstration of resolve, portraying Caesar as both a fearless youth and a seasoned strategist in the making. Yet this saga also became a foundational myth within Caesar's carefully constructed legend, a compelling story of resilience and daring that would resonate broadly within Roman culture. In an era that revered divine favour and legendary feats, Caesar astutely wove this narrative into the tapestry of his public image, cementing perceptions not only of a capable leader, but of one seemingly touched by fortune or destiny. Each retelling contributed to his aura as a man both of and for the people, capable of transcending adversity through sheer force of will. The incident illuminated the irony and unpredictability inherent in the fortune of the ambitious. Captivity, initially a mark of misfortune, transformed into an opportunity to display unyielding boldness and relentless pursuit of justice. Caesar gleaned from this ordeal a fundamental lesson of crisis management, that within the depths of adversity lay the seeds of unprecedented opportunity. Such realizations indelibly marked his approach to future challenges, guiding him to seize potential advantages amidst chaos with unrelenting ambition. Emerging with renewed vigour, Caesar displayed a mindset shaped by resilience and adaptability, essential qualities for navigating the volatile landscape of Roman politics. This incident infused him with the belief that destiny could be crafted through the precise calibration of action and ambition. As he set his sights on Rome, awakened with an unmistakable sense of purpose, Caesar resolved to harness the tides of fate, shaping them to his will as he climbed the formidable heights of the Roman world. Thus the path before him lay clear, one not simply of political ambition, but of destiny forged through adversity and audacity. Caesar's journey onwards would be framed by the lessons wrought from this encounter, encapsulating a vision of power not as an inherited right, but as a prize seized through calculated daring. This youthful endeavour signalled the commencement of a saga, a narrative of ascension that history would echo long after the swords of Rome had dulled. In ancient Rome, the path to power was known as the cursus honorum, a treacherous ladder that demanded both cunning and courage. For Julius Caesar, stepping onto the first rung as quaestor was no small feat. The role of managing state funds and provincial treasuries was not just an initiation into politics, but an immersion into a world where each transaction was weighted with political promise or threat. Caesar quickly understood that honesty held little value in this arena. It was a vulnerability in a city where ambition reigned supreme. In the halls of power, alliances were woven as intricately as webs, and Caesar was no stranger to such manipulation. Ascending to aedile, Caesar's ambitions grew bolder. In Rome, adoration was won through spectacle, and spectacle cost money, usually borrowed. He orchestrated games and festivals of unprecedented grandeur, captivating the masses but plunging himself deeper into debt. This delicate dance between popularity and insolvency mirrored the broader contradictions of Roman society, where grandeur frequently flirted with decay. Rome's citizens, both patrician and plebeian, watched in awe as gladiatorial combats and grand feasts unfolded, their minds filled with Caesar's name, as he deftly turned spectacle into political leverage. Yet every borrowed denarius tightened the financial noose. Caesar's creditors were relentless, their patience measured in the weight of IOUs rather than loyalty. Still, he navigated this financial tightrope with a gambler's nerve, his public persona growing as his personal finances threatened to crumble. There was a duality here. Caesar's rise through spectacle was a bet on public affection, a high-stakes gamble with creditors as silent partners in his political drama. Caesar's trajectory next led him to the role of praetor, a position demanding oversight of legal proceedings and requiring strategic acumen. The facade of justice masked a brutal political battleground, where Caesar manipulated trials and leveraged his influence to expand his power base. In the public eye, he aligned himself with populares, championing causes that resonated with the restless plebeian majority, all while maintaining his precarious balance in the Senate's treacherous corridors. It was a performance synchronized with precision, as he balanced reform with personal political survival. Upon becoming Pontifex Maximus, Caesar's grasp extended beyond the temporal into the spiritual. This sacred office blended religious authority with political clout, offering Caesar a unique platform to interlace the divine with his personal ambitions. Here he learned to finesse the delicate balance of pleasing the populace with religious decorum, while furthering his schemes. The role demanded charisma as much as spiritual stewardship, a combination at which Caesar excelled, weaving religious ritual into his expanding influence. Throughout his ascent, financial vice was both a constraint and a weapon. With debts as significant as his political aspirations, Caesar turned fiscal peril into a device of power. His creditors were an uneasy consortium of allies and opportunists, each holding a stake in his success or demise. By negotiating cunningly and extending his influence, Caesar wielded debt like a master tactician, ensuring his creditors' silence in exchange for future power. He knew that his leverage lay not just in repayment, but in the continued promise of his rise. Political allies and rivals watched his every move. Caesar's climb was a study in human relationships as complex as any battlefield. He spun alliances with the skill of a weaver, crafting coalitions from disparate factions, stringing together generals and senators with shared interests and whispered promises. His networks of influence extended across the city, but each connection was a double-edged sword, as brittle as the trust upon which it was formed. Rivals schemed in shadowy alcoves, driven by envy and ambition, waiting for a misstep to topple him from his precarious height. Yet even as storms gathered among the Senate ranks, Caesar's star continued to rise. The public adored him, drawn in by his populist rhetoric and grand gestures that seemed to promise change. His charisma shone on the steps of the Forum, where he spoke directly to the masses, bypassing the entrenched power of the Senate. In this turbulent arena, the people's champion became the Senate's fear, for his ascent spelled the inevitable eclipse of their authority. Caesar's journey along the cursus honorum teetered on the brink of triumph and tension, each political victory shadowed by the spectre of collapse. His tenure as consul was marked by reforms intended to placate civic unrest, calculated as stepping stones in his ascension. Yet, these moves fanned the flames of dissent among senators, as allies became rivals and whispered betrayal lurked behind polite smiles. Caesar approached the zenith of his potential, standing poised between soaring heights and ruinous depths, driven by ambitions as relentless as the tides of Roman politics. His path, marked by audacity and resilience, set the stage for a new chapter, enthralling and fearsome in equal measure. In the shadowy corridors of Roman power, Julius Caesar's ambition simmered like a quiet, insidious flame. From his formative years, influenced deeply by his uncle Gaius Marius's military reformation, Caesar absorbed the essence of power dynamics. Rome's chaos was his crucible, where his dreams of dominion were forged. Ensnared by debt, acquired not out of indulgence but strategy, he aimed to rise above the grinding cursus honorum, envisioning a new path to control. His audacious encounter with pirates had already shown him the potency of audacity mixed with ruthlessness, a lesson that laid the groundwork for a more audacious plan, the creation of a triumvirate. By 60 BCE, Rome teetered on a precipice of instability, fertile ground for those bold enough to seize its reins. Caesar, viewing the Republic's fractures as opportunities, orchestrated a clandestine alliance with two powerful Roman oligarchs, Pompey the Great and Marcus Licinius Crassus. Each man possessed a piece of the puzzle necessary for dominance. Pompey commanded respect and military prowess. Crassus wielded a fortune capable of swaying any opposition, while Caesar, with his political acumen and public charisma, held the key to Rome's fickle public heart. Their alliance was pragmatic, a pact between wary equals rather than bonded friends, designed to exploit Rome's internecine weaknesses and elevate their individual stakes. This conspiracy reshuffled Rome's political deck, sparking apprehension and resentment within the Senate. The senators, guardians of Rome's traditions, viewed this concentration of power with unease. They watched as Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus manoeuvred the Republic like a marionette, their silent subversion of senatorial dominance evidenced by each manoeuvre and public spectacle. Yet, the invisible string holding the triumvirate together was taut with mutual distrust, a fragile weave of necessity amidst competing ambitions. Crassus, despite his vast wealth, yearned for martial honour to match his fiscal might, perceiving his lack of military achievements as a blemish on his stature. His venture against the Parthians was fueled more by personal vanity than strategy, a bid for glory that ended disastrously at the Battle of Carrhae. His death shattered the power triangle, leaving behind the simmering rivalries of Caesar and Pompey, each eyeing the resulting void with calculated intent. At the heart of this alliance lay Pompey, whose military exploits had won him both lands and titles. His marriage to Caesar's daughter Julia was not just a familial bond, but a thread that tied their fates together, keeping potential discord at bay. With Crassus gone and Julia's death in childbirth shortly thereafter, that thread snapped, and with it, the last vestige of personal loyalty linking Caesar and Pompey unravelled. Bereft of unifying ties, their alliance dissolved into an open contest for supremacy. As private tensions spilled over into public theatre, the Senate, ever wary of Caesar's rising star, backed Pompey. But Pompey found himself an uneasy ally to senators who had previously feared his ambitions. He became a reluctant symbol of the Republic's faltering defence against Caesar's perceived monarchic ambitions. A precariously balanced figurehead, cornered into position by necessity rather than conviction. Strategically anchored in Gaul, Caesar exploited every victory to bolster his image, weaving a narrative of conquest and benevolence that endeared him to the Roman populace. Through charismatic leadership and astute propaganda, his reputation swelled, overshadowing even Pompey's previously unblemished military record. Caesar's distributions of land and spoils ensured soldiers' loyalty, tying their fortunes inexorably to a continued ascension. Meanwhile, Rome trembled with rumour and speculation, the streets alive with whispers of war, as old allegiances frayed and new bribes were offered and accepted. With the triumvirate's delicate balance disturbed, the Republic's political landscape shifted inexorably towards confrontation. Caesar's strategic patience in Gaul masked his calculative advancement toward Rome, biding his time as the Senate's anxiety deepened, their manoeuvres growing more desperate and erratic. The death of both Crassus and Julia removed the linchpins restraining rivalry, casting Caesar and Pompey as inevitable antagonists in a final act unwritten but imminent. The once mighty triumvirate had paved the way for uncontrolled ambition to bloom unchecked, each man's ego and desire for supremacy widening the fissures within the Republic's foundations. Their pact, neither sanctified by loyalty nor strengthened by eternal bonds, had reached a brittle breaking point, leaving Rome on the precipice of a civil war that would forever change its trajectory. Here in this volatile crucible, the final vestiges of the Republic would crumble, as power realigned and history whispered of the conflicts yet to unfold. At the edge of the known world, Gaul loomed like a shadow for Rome, a land of mystery defined by its fierce tribes and whispered legends. These tribes, steadfast in their customs, eyed Rome's advances with suspicion, their worlds bound by superstition and worship of strange gods who demanded sacrifices. For the Senate, Gaul represented both a threat and an irresistible opportunity, a buffer against the northern barbarian menace, and a repository of untapped wealth. The Roman elite, with equal parts disdain and desire, longed to bring Gaul into the Republic, understanding that only a leader of exceptional prowess could tame this frontier. Enter Julius Caesar, eyes alight with ambition. Fresh from the political maelstrom of Rome, he was appointed governor and proconsul over Cisalpine Gaul, Transalpine Gaul, and Illyricum. Here was his chance to carve his legacy in the annals of history. Caesar, understanding the challenges he faced, knew he needed more than brute force. He needed an army bonded by loyalty and fire. His charisma, born from navigating Rome's ruthless corridors of power, ignited this loyalty. Caesar's men saw him not as a distant commander, but as a comrade who shared in their victories and endured their defeats. His magnetic presence cultivated an urban legion that would march into the jaws of death without hesitation, for they were more than his soldiers, they were his brothers in arms. Under his leadership, reward flowed generously, ensuring their stakes in Caesar's campaigns were personal. Their survival depended on collective strength and unshakable belief in their general, a powerful motivator as they plunged into Gaul's ancient forests. Before launching the Grand Conquest, Caesar's keen military strategizing tested the waters. He skillfully exploited tribal weaknesses, deploying his legions strategically across Gaul's vast territories, each fortification exemplifying Roman military brilliance. These moves sent messages as clear as the rumble of thunder. They called tribes to reconsider unity against Rome. Caesar's battles were often more about sending messages than obliteration, allowing dread and the inevitability of Roman might to conquer long before his soldiers did. It was a prelude to revolutionizing Gaul, a quiet warning. Resistance was futile, and rebellion would yield swift reprisal. The Helvetii posed an early significant test. Seeking migration through Roman lands, they represented a threat Caesar couldn't ignore. Meeting them at Bibracte, Caesar's forces engaged in an epic clash that would set the tone for the campaigns ahead. Roman steel met Gallic passion, their battle a definitive testament to Roman versatility in the face of tribal ferocity. Victory was decisive, a tribute to Caesar's military acumen, and brought the Helvetii to heel, solidifying his reputation among neighbouring tribes. Caesar's conquest became an ideological assertion. The futility of defiance was etched into every Roman victory. Yet raw conquest alone would not suffice. Caesar's gaze shifted to a shrewder conquest, political manipulation. He sought to rule more through clever alliances than sheer force. Tribal leaders were seduced by promises of favour, intertwining their fates with Rome's through loyalty, laced with veiled threats. Diplomacy rather than the sword wove Roman unity through Gaul, a patchwork of pacts resting upon pliable allegiances. The campaign reached a pivotal moment at Alesia. Here Vercingetorix, a resilient chieftain, stood prepared to defy Caesar. Inside the fortified city, his forces were both trapped and defiant, challenging Roman might. Caesar's response was a masterstroke, constructing an 18-kilometre circumvallation, a marvel of engineering designed to starve the Gallic spirit into submission. As reinforcements flooded from the Gallic heartlands, a siege ensued, Rome's steely resolve clashing against Gallic desperation. Against all odds, Caesar's legions prevailed, their tenacity echoing Rome's inevitable dominance across the windswept plains of Gaul. With the conquest largely secured, Caesar embarked on transforming Gaul into part of Rome itself. Towns and cities emerged under Roman influence, with architectural wonders and cultural customs weaving Roman threads into the Gallic tapestry. Cities like Lutetia flourished, Romanizing daily life as they became beacons of prosperity. Caesar's vision extended beyond dominion. He sought cultural amalgamation, conquered territories where Latin echoed and cities stood testament to Rome's grandeur. But true victory lay not in dominion but in understanding. Caesar recognized that real power required winning hearts and minds. By appreciating Gaul's depth, he fostered bridges between conqueror and vanquished. His charm and respect for their ways transformed potential resentment into reconciliation. Gallic nobility embraced Roman virtues, drawn by shared fates and adapted customs, softening their resistance like iron against a forge. Even in defeat, Vercingetorix emerged as a symbol. Executed in Rome, his martyrdom served as a reminder that identity and spirit cannot be fully quenched. The memory of his resistance endured, a narrative that transcended his chains and sparked future defiance, a testament to the tenacity of an unyielding spirit against domination. By decade's end, Gaul's wealth had both enriched Caesar and ignited envy in Rome. His ambitions now reached beyond territories to the heart of the Republic, a city steeped in intrigue. Gaul had been a crucible for Caesar, transforming him into a military and political titan whose shadow would soon loom large over Rome itself. As Caesar returned to the Republic, destiny whispered of legacy, cementing his mark upon the world, a leader who, through Gaul, shaped the fate of empire. In the flickering twilight of ancient Roman politics, tension simmered ominously. The Senate, a bastion of power and tradition, found itself entangled in a web of fear spun by Julius Caesar's rising influence. Dispatching a decree laden with the weight of history, the senators commanded Caesar to lay down his arms and return to Rome as a civilian. This was a strategic maneuver, a bid to dismantle the potential threat posed by a man whose ambition had long outgrown the robes of the Senate. Yet Pompey, once Caesar's ally and then a wary adversary, underestimated the man who had weathered the stormy seas of Roman ambition. In the shadowy northern expanses of Italy, where the air was thick with the whispers of ancient trees and the muted footfall of legions, Caesar received this ultimatum. The cold, haunting winds carried with them a scent of betrayal, a harbinger of the consequences awaiting him, should he bow to such demands. He stood at a crossroads, one path leading to a surrender of power and a likely confrontation with political treachery, the other toward irrevocable defiance. Within Caesar's camp, tension hung heavy. His soldiers, men forged in battles and blood, waited with bated breath. The Rubicon, a shallow river of silent significance, marked the boundary between the known world of legality and the chaos of rebellion. On its banks, draped in a ghostly mist, Caesar contemplated his path. His soldiers gathered around, their faces etched with the weariness of campaigns yet flushed with fierce loyalty. The declaration Alea iacta est, the die is cast, woman, was more than mere words. It was an invocation, fusing his fate with Rome's. Crossing that line was a step into destiny, stoked by ambition and underscored by the irony of a man who sought to save the Republic, yet threatened its very foundation. As Caesar's army began its march toward Rome, the echoes of history seemed to reverberate with each step. The Italian countryside, serene yet tense, became a theatre for destiny's unfolding spectacle. Villages fell silent, and the landscapes, once lush with routine, turned into arenas awaiting either glory or ruin. Caesar, ever the master of perception, painted himself not as a conqueror, but as a liberator, promising reforms and stability to a populace weary of Senate corruption. The city of Rome, seat of the Republic and cradle of political machinations, was on edge. The news of Caesar's crossing sent tremors of panic through its age-old streets, igniting fears and hopes in equal measure. For the Senate, once a symbol of imperium and authority, indecision clawed at its core. Pompey faced the stark reality of Rome's unreadiness for conflict within its gates. Citizens found themselves at the mercy of fate, perched precariously on a knife's edge, their dreams suspended in the murmur of uncertainty. In the urban forums and alleyways, ordinary Romans navigated the flux of power, their hearts imprisoned between fear of upheaval and hunger for change. Caesar's actions were met with a mixture of dread and expectation, his name whispered in darkened taverns and vibrant marketplaces. For those not ensnared by the Senate's unraveling grip, the rise of Caesar was tinged with the promise of a Rome reborn. Caesar was no ordinary military man. His conquest was conducted with artistry and strategy, blended with the theatre of his presence. Proclamations of justice and reform reached the citizenry, turning skeptics into supporters. His charisma knitted together an army not of conquest alone, but as heralds of a new Roman dawn. With each intersection of diplomacy and strength, his legend grew. Allies were wooed with pledges of stability, while adversaries faced the inexorable drift of tide. Within the quaking halls of the Senate, deliberations became desperate and fragmented, a chamber now echoing with the fear of annihilation. Venerable figures, once paragons of political acumen, found themselves rendered impotent in unwelcome chaos. Fear wove through their conversations, a palpable thread binding the air with intrigue and doubt, casting shadows on statues of Rome's departed champions. Falsehoods and whispers, the phantoms of war, danced through both camps. In Caesar's ranks, tales from the capital became legends, feeding courage and resolve. In Rome, paranoia spread. From the mouths of merchants and the pens of the elite, stories took flight, inflating Caesar to divine status or painting the Senate as doomed relics. Reality became a creature of the dark, moulded by the firelight of unseen players. As the collision between Caesar and the Republic loomed, Rome found itself a captive audience, awaiting the first notes of an inevitable symphony of war and rebirth. The ancients spoke of portents, while the people felt the pulse of their world on the brink. Families divided, friendships stretched taut, and in some cases allegiances switched under pressure's relentless hand. Rome was caught between two destinies, the untouched ideals of its past or the reality of a new dawn, born from the ashes of tradition. The path was set. Caesar's bold gamble, memorialised by the crossing of a modest river, promised the collapse of a republic steeped in history and the rise of an empire that would echo through the globe. It marked an era where ambition would fuse with destiny, forging a legacy that only centuries would define and emulate. The fall of alliances in Rome was as inevitable as the cycle of night and day. Once Pompey the Great and Julius Caesar, brought together by ambition and the binding thread of Pompey's marriage to Caesar's daughter Julia, now stood on opposite sides of a chasm, widened by power. The death of Julia had severed the frail bond of family, allowing ambition to blaze through the cracks. It was power, a relentless force that beckoned both men towards a confrontation that would shake the foundations of Rome. An alliance meant to steer the Republic had crumbled, with the Senate wary and desperate, casting its lot with Pompey. This wasn't a matter of loyalty, but rather a last defensive stand against Caesar's rising star. Deep within, Rome's very essence had been eroded. What once was a republic governed by principles and checks had become a battleground of personal feuds and namesakes. Caesar, a figure of immense charisma, commanded not only a legion, but inspired devotion that bordered on worship. Pompey bore victories of old and the Senate's tenuous backing. All awaited breathless as the destinies of the empire now rested with them. This falling apart from senators to slaves reverberated through every crack of Roman society. In the opening days of 49 BCE, the clatter of military preparations echoed throughout Rome. Caesar's march across the Rubicon defied Senate orders, signalling war, not just with an army, but the very essence of Rome's age-old traditions. His legions, banners fluttering in the cool breeze, were not mere troops. They were a statement of Caesar's defiance and destiny. Caesar led these soldiers, not by mere command, but as one possessed by the spirit of greatness. These were not conscripts, but chosen followers, fighting for what they believed right, a right only the victor would define. On the other side, Pompey gathered strength in the east, his actions calculated but not hasty, more a strategic consolidation than a retreat. His followers, a patchwork of new recruits and seasoned fighters, gathered under his command, calling upon victory ghosts of wars past. The lands that once stood untouched by internal strife now became theatres of conflict, where battles raged and alliances fell fluid as sand. Cities defying Caesar's call found themselves besieged, caught in the crossfire of allegiance, a dangerous gamble between death and survival. Across Italy, the standoff between Caesar and Pompey turned cities into the heart of looming warfare. Ariminum and Picenum welcomed Caesar's forces, driven by a mixture of hope and the fearsome allure of his name. Cities did not just follow him, they embraced the change he promised, a transformative wave in a republic tearing its own limbs. Pompey, however, held his ground, fortifying cities like Naples and Capua with resilience. In this upheaval, families divided, friendships turned to ash, and every man's worth was weighed against his political alliance. The very culture of Rome entwined with martial urgency as rumours brewed fear and hope, with every soldier's move dictated by fate. The clash came to a head at Pharsalus in 48 BCE, a decisive blow between titans that echoed through the ages. Caesar's men, seasoned by battles in Gaul, faced Pompey's larger forces. Despite being outnumbered, Caesar's brilliance turned this disadvantage on its head. His veterans fought with a desperation and resolve that tied their destiny with Caesar's own, their cause just as much on the line as the Republic's future. Pompey, bolstered by numbers and strategic advantage, envisioned certain victory, only to see it fractured as Caesar's cavalry shattered his own. Pharsalus was not simply a battle, it was a clash of ideologies, the waning republic against rising authoritarian vision. With defeat at Pharsalus, Pompey fled, leaving soldiers to Caesar's will. His escape marked not just a strategic failure, but symbolised the shattering of his hopes as he sought refuge in Egypt, a land where he expected sanctuary and resurgence. But irony wrote a cruel page in his history. Upon Egyptian soils, seeking favour with Caesar, young King Ptolemy XIII turned treacherous, ordering Pompey's death. Thus ended a majestic career under a foreign sun, obliterating a dream of a Rome beholden to its republican traditions. Caesar wept on receiving Pompey's head, perhaps mourning the end of a friendship, or feeling the tremor of his own unsteady path. In Egypt, a tangled web awaited Caesar, the murder of Pompey marking not an end but a knotted beginning. Caught in the tides of an internal succession struggle, Caesar was drawn into a delicate dance between young Ptolemy XIII and the astute Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra in exile saw in Caesar a chance, not just for rescue but empowerment, paving her way back to power. Their partnership, a mixing of personal allure and political necessity, marked a pivotal alignment between the two powers. As the war's clamour dwindled, Caesar faced growing unrest within his legions, men weary, stretched, and yearning for home. Mutinies, whispering of collapse, surfaced, but Caesar soothed these simmering tensions with promises of reward, land and retirement, a testament to his tact and leadership. Yet Caesar's reach extended beyond the battlefield. His reforms aimed to reshape Rome entirely, confronting a future of potential grandeur that others perceived as monarchical ambition in disguise. As Rome teetered on the edge of transformation, Caesar's vision faced mounting whispers of nostalgia for the Republic's heart, even as the city gridded itself for change. Amidst victory and defeats, the ironies of Caesar's path haunted Rome, a familiar dance of power, ambition, and the eternal dance with fate that knows no friend, only history's unending march. When Julius Caesar returned to Rome, he was not just a general but a beacon of victory, and power. His entrance was more than a homecoming. It was a grand procession, a victory parade reminiscent of Rome's former glories. Chariots laden with gold traversed the Via Sacra, displaying the spoils of Gaul and serving as a testament to Caesar's military might. The streets swelled with Romans, their cheers mingling with the sounds of victory. Trumpets, pounding hooves, and the crackle of banners. For many, Caesar symbolised hope, a promise of stability after the turmoil of civil war. Yet beneath this spectacle, a more seismic shift was unfolding. The Senate, once confident in its power, sensed the tremors of change, as Caesar returned with not just glory, but an intent to reshape Rome itself. Underneath the laurels and cheers, the limits of the Republic began to blur, foreshadowing an impending transformation that would unravel the facade of the Roman state. The title, Dictator Perpetuo, bestowed upon Caesar marked a colossal shift in Rome's governance. Traditionally, a dictator was a temporary measure, a role designed for crisis. But with this title, Caesar transgressed Rome's republican principles, extending his influence indefinitely. This wasn't just a personal victory, it was a rupture in Rome's ideological foundations. Caesar promised reform and stability, yet his perpetual rule echoed ominously through the Senate, signalling a drift towards autocracy. To the elite, Caesar's rise whispered of monarchy, a path they had abandoned long ago, and some feared a future scrawled out in personal dynasties. However, the common populace saw his reign as a shield against chaos, despite the shadows it cast over the Republic's identity. While rooted in authority, Caesar divined the Republic's needs with sweeping reforms that touched every facet of Roman life. His expanded Senate brought in provincial elites, ostensibly for inclusivity, but also to dilute senatorial power that resisted change. Land reforms aimed to address economic disparities, granting land to veterans and the poor, while the Julian calendar transformed daily life, imprinting the epochs with Caesar's own design. Yet these changes sparked resentment among the aristocracy, disrupting established hierarchies and drawing the ire of those who watched their influence wane. His reforms tugged Rome toward a visionary future, while simultaneously seeding discord among those who saw their world slipping away. Under Caesar's rule, the Senate, once the heart of Roman governance, was morphed into a mirror of his vision. By enlarging its ranks with allies, he weakened its once stringent power to resist his will. The senators, traditionally wielders of influence through debate and democracy, now found themselves echoing in a hollowed chamber where their voices shrank against Caesar's supremacy. Rome's bastion of power had become more a decorative backdrop than a pillar of authority, its transformation a living testament to Caesar's imprint on Rome. While his changes promised unity, they also estranged the elite. Witnessing their venerable institution serve Caesar's grand design. As Caesar's power grew, so did his cult of personality, edging into the realm of deity. Statues arose across Rome depicting him not merely as a leader, but as a potential god, inspiring and unsettling onlookers. This mingling of propaganda with power crafted an aura of divinity around Caesar, suggesting a destiny entwined with the gods. Yet among traditionalists, this deification was distasteful, recalling Rome's ancient kings. The Senate found itself divided between those for whom Caesar's divinity offered gain, and others for whom it was the Republic's undoing. The elevation of Caesar stirred dissent, fostering a tension that would sooner or later demand resolution. In his quest for stability, Caesar employed clemency with precision, pardoning former foes and remoulding them into allies. This strategy portrayed Caesar as confident, a leader generous enough to forgive. binding potential enemies by allegiance rather than fear. Yet, while some embraced this olive branch, others saw through it as enforced submission. Beneath the surface, resentment smouldered, taught to wait patiently amidst the new regime. His clemency harboured a duality, a surface peace woven from an undercurrent of unresolved tension. Caesar's vision extended beyond political reform to physical transformation. His construction projects, from grand temples to public forums, reshaped Rome. These monuments stood as symbols of both prosperity and personal legacy. Critics view them as vanity, a testament to Caesar's ambitions over democratic concern. Therefore, while his architectural endeavours urbanised and beautified Rome, they also fed the criticism of those wary of his intentions. Caesar's strength lay in his carefully spun networks. From villas to the forum, his associates provided ears and secured loyalty. Figures like Mark Antony were indispensable, bolstering Caesar's power with charisma and loyalty. Yet this interwoven network was vulnerable. Allegiances, restless and tenuous, could shift abruptly. While these connections fortified Caesar's rule, they also laid bare cracks in the foundations of his power, hinting at a possible unraveling amidst swelling discontent. The perception of Caesar oscillated between reformer and autocrat. To many, he was a beacon of change, his reforms beneficial to the masses. Yet to the elite, his leadership spoke of tyranny beneath the veneer of populism. Public sentiments were thus divided, balancing between hope of renewal and the dread of returning to monarchy. As Caesar's rule advanced, whispers of a conspiracy unfurled in the corridors of power. Senators, believing the Republic endangered, gathered, convinced salvation lay in removing Caesar. Led by figures like Brutus and Cassius, the conspirators' murmurs solidified into a plot, an endgame that would not rescue the Republic but shatter its last illusion of freedom. In the months leading up to the assassination of Julius Caesar, the political atmosphere of Rome was a charged tapestry of fear, ambition, and looming betrayal. The Senate, once the bedrock of the Republic's power, found itself overshadowed by Caesar's enormous and ever-growing influence. Declared dictator perpetuo, or dictator for life, Caesar's sweeping reforms and grand designs for Rome were perceived not only as a power grab, but as a direct assault on the Republic's cherished traditions. Senators, feeling increasingly marginalised, whispered their dissent in the shadows, their unease becoming a rallying point for discord. Caesar's rise, painted by his prowess and unmatched charisma, now cast a silhouette reminiscent of kingship, an anathema to Roman ideals which held monarchy in deep contempt. Publicly, senators bent their knees in allegiance. Privately, they harboured resentment. This dichotomy between public facade and private intent germinated seeds of conspiracy. Within Rome's opulent streets and grandeur-laced corridors, whispers of high treason bounced off marble walls. Words like freedom and liberty became rallying cries among those fearing their erosion under Caesar's far-reaching rule. For these conspirators, it was not merely the preservation of tradition, but a conflict to keep the identity of Rome intact. Yet plotting against Caesar was perilously fraught. Within the Senate halls, alliances and friendships collided with ambition. Among the conspirators were Caesar's former allies, statesmen like Gaius Cassius Longinus and Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus, a man caught between his love for Caesar and his lineage's republican legacy, served as a moral anchor within their deliberations. Inspired by his ancestors' role in overthrowing the last Roman king, Brutus agonised over becoming a betrayer of either a personal bond or public duty. The conspirators recognised their precarious position. To the masses, Caesar was a hero who expanded the Republic's domains and brought prosperity. To even contemplate such an act of treachery required not just careful execution, but the delicate management of its bloody aftermath. In standing against what they saw as tyranny, they risked mirroring the very despotism they despised. Yet, amid the flickering lamplight of clandestine meetings, they cemented a plan destined to change history, even if the horizon lay shrouded in uncertainty. As the Ides of March drew near, the streets of Rome were eerily tranquil, belying the storm rumbling beneath the surface. Caesar, buoyed by power and adored by many, remained oblivious to the web tightening around him. The conspirators, moving in stealth, convened under the guise of ordinary assemblies, their gestures and whispered collusions laden with latent intent. The air seemed to hum with unsaid tension, a perceptible unease settling over a city unfathomably advancing towards disorder. Despite ominous warnings, the portents of soothsayers, and the troubled dreams of his wife Calpurnia, Caesar's confidence remained unmarred. While the city's inhabitants carried on unperturbed, this calm sharp contrasted with the conspirators' urgent machinations. This juxtaposition highlighted a portrait of an inevitable descent into chaos unknown to many, but felt by those attuned to the ripples of power. The theatre of Pompey, site of the decisive Senate meeting on that fateful day, stood in harsh irony, a structure once echoing the power of Pompey, Caesar's former ally and adversary. Here, among the flickered shadows, the conspirators sharpened their resolve. 60 in number they gathered, daggers concealed beneath their togas, anticipation building to a cruel crescendo as Caesar, wrapped in his unyielding stature, entered the chamber. It was a fateful convergence of history, destiny, and treachery. The meeting inside Pompey's theatre disintegrated into tragedy with brutal alacrity. Cinna's request, presented innocuously, drew Caesar into the circle of conspirators. Quickly, daggers gleamed in a hail of blades, driving through the facade of decorum, propelled by fear, ideology, and a skewed sense of justice. Caesar's immediate reaction unfolded as one of profound betrayal, not as a commanding general, but as a man devastated by treachery from those once dear to him. No blow was as piercing as Brutus's involvement, Caesar's supposed final words, "Et tu, Brute?" starkly capturing his sorrow. Caesar's blood stained not just his robes, but the heart of the Republic. His death marked the end of an era, not only extinguishing the life of a leader, but dismantling the last illusions of the Republic's enduring ability to govern unfragmented. The murder, rather than ensuring the Republic's survival, plunged Rome into an abyss of disorder and civil conflict. In the days that followed, panic ensued among the conspirators who grossly miscalculated public sentiment. Instead of rallying under restored Republican values, the people mourned Caesar, their allegiance shifting towards retribution rather than liberty. Caesar's funeral, masterfully exploited by Mark Antony, rekindled an emotional fervour through his oration that transformed the city's landscape. His rhetoric, coupled with Caesar's blood-soaked toga, converted shock into rage, blurring the lines between assassins and saviours, playing Rome's populace like a finely tuned instrument against the betrayals of their leader. In the wake of the assassination, a new force emerged, Caesar's heir, Gaius Octavius. A mere youth, Octavian stepped forward, not with a warrior's ferocity, but with astute political adaptability. As tensions simmered, he coalesced power, aligning with Antony and Lepidus to form the second triumvirate, aiming to reclaim and control the chaos. Octavian's manoeuvring heralded an irreversible transition. Rome, stripped of ideals she once cherished, accepted an emergent imperial reality. The Republic faded, its essence overtaken by the unavoidable approach of empire. Power centralised under Octavian's calculated embrace, unshackling the final binds of republican governance. The death of Caesar thus facilitated a transformation, moving Rome unavoidably towards its imperial destiny, an evolution wrought by tragedy, ambition, and the silent, unyielding march of historical tides. In the days following Caesar's brutal assassination, Rome teeters on the brink of chaos, a city draped in a shroud of fear and uncertainty. Citizens whisper in hushed tones, casting cautious glances at the reality of 60 conspirators, emboldened by their bloody act, begins to settle. The Senate stands as a battlefield of the mind, steeped in crimson, while citizens gather in anxious clusters, driven by intrigue and apprehension. The air is heavy with the perfume of incense from crammed temples where prayers for peace, or perhaps retribution, rise like ghosts to the heavens. Vendors at the market lower their voices, wary of the shifting political winds, as the notion of a republic seems nothing more than a relic teetering precariously on the edge of time. In this turbulent landscape, a young figure, complex and cunning, emerges, Gaius Octavius, the adopted heir to Caesar. At just 18, Octavian steps into the arena of power, with a mix of youthful innocence and keen insight, a paradox with shrewd aspirations shadowed by the great name he bears. His entrance into Rome is almost silent, yet it speaks volumes, a whispered assurance of potential that unsettles the senators who dreamt of a void, not a successor. With subtle craft, Octavian forges his path, embracing the power of Caesar's legacy to reel in the Roman legions and endear himself to the people. His eloquence in speech spins webs of promises: order, restoration, renewal. Yet standing firm on this volatile stage is Mark Antony, a seasoned orator and Caesar's loyal lieutenant. Antony, with the thunderous force of his rhetoric and raw battlefield grit, portrays himself as the rightful heir to Rome's legacy, a beacon of the once great republic policing stability amid the gathering storm. However, beneath this heroic facade lies a hunger for power, simmering alongside his ambitions. His partnership with Octavian starts as a practical alliance, though his arrogance in dismissing the youthful heir's resolve festers into an underestimation. Their tension, though hidden, simmers, a prelude to inevitable conflict. Amid Rome's political maze, Octavian and Antony fashion a fragile pact, marking the birth of the second triumvirate, alongside Marcus Aemilius Lepidus. Together they pledge to avenge Caesar, securing a tentative grip on a fractured Rome. Their unity, however, is tense, existing within an atmosphere ripe with personal agendas. Proscriptions are declared. Relentless purges of their enemies taint an already blood-stained city, as senators and citizens find themselves caught in the crossfire once more. The stage shifts to Philippi, where the triumvirs confront the remnants of Brutus and Cassius, Caesar's killers, hoping to seal Rome's fate. The battlefield, rife with cries and clashing steel, bears witness to ideals colliding and fading. Antony and Octavian's forces press forward, defeating the conspirators, sealing the Republic's doom in the hard earth. Yet this triumph sows seeds for future discord, every victory a step towards civil unrest. Even as Rome struggles with its identity, Antony's attention drifts eastward, captivated by the allure of Cleopatra, Egypt's enchanting queen. Their union, inflamed by desire and ambition, acts as a stage of its own, seduction mingling with diplomacy, evoking both dread and fascination in Rome. Cleopatra and Antony, lost in their own world, forget the battleground they tread, their relationship a tapestry of romance interwoven with the threads of power. Octavian, steward of his uncle's legacy, takes up the quill, engaging in a propaganda campaign that blurs truth and fiction, painting Antony as Cleopatra's puppet, swaying Rome's sentiment. He crafts his image as the noble restorer of Roman virtues, cultivating support with a strategist's precision. Public sentiment shifts, tilting ever in his favour as words become his arsenal, more piercing than swords. The rhetoric inevitably ignites another conflict, climaxing at Actium. Here in 31 BCE, fleets collide upon tumultuous seas, a stage where the drama of empire unfolds with each clash. As Egyptian sails retreat, leaving Antony exposed, the naval battlefield becomes a theatre of destiny. Octavian's forces, driven by the skilled Agrippa, outmaneuver Cleopatra and Antony's forces. The outcome reshapes Rome's future. Octavian's victory marking the decline of Roman resistance and the rise of imperial ambition. Antony and Cleopatra's tragic denouement in Alexandria heralds the end of an era. Forsaken and besieged, they choose death over defeat, their lives bound eternally in legend's embrace. Their downfall signals the dissolution of potential opposition, leaving Octavian unopposed as Rome's future shapes itself beneath his careful scrutiny. As Octavian returns to Rome, he steps into the role of Augustus, a title marking not merely personal triumph, but the dawn of a monumental shift for Rome. Emperor where once was a republic, Augustus orchestrates a new order from history's ashes, steering Rome into an age renowned as Pax Romana. His reign births a legacy, intertwining reform, valour and governance, casting long shadows throughout the ages. From the rise of Augustus, the Republic finds its twilight, and Rome blooms into empire, a testament to human ambition's boundless reach. With the empire's birth secured, our tale of Rome's transformation comes to a close. If this journey through ancient drama and intrigue captivated you, consider liking and subscribing for more stories that bring history's echoes to life.